Hi, everybody. I have with me tonight beautiful, beautiful chocolate. If you could see his eyes, they are sort of the color of the sky, and they're kind of buried in his little mask right here. And they're both really big, so it's getting harder and harder to have both of them. But this is dear Chocolate, and his brother is Fluffy. And one of these days I'll bring them back together, both. But I show my dear cats because so many of you are always asking about Fluffy and Chocolate, and that you love your cats as much as I love them. And it sort of almost pains me tonight to start out my news with just yesterday, August 28th, KIRO TV in Olympia, Washington, reported the 12th bloodlessly mutilated cat in Thurston County. The mutilated cat was found behind an office building, and a quote, forensic exam confirmed that the cat's injuries match the specific mutilations of the previous 11 cats who have been found bloodlessly mutilated since February. The county's Joint Animal Services has reported to local media that many of the cats found in Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater over the last 6 months have been surgically and bloodlessly cut very straight from a point at the base of their neck down to the genital region, and then in a very straight, razor straight edge, the spine only is lifted out. No fluid, no blood, and the precision of the excision, I am told, is extraordinary. For reasons unknown, the cats seem to be deliberately left in yards or public places as if the perpetrator wants the strangely cut up bodies to be found. Today, on August 29th, the Thurston County Sheriff's Office told Fox News that 2 more cats were found this Wednesday day, presumably raising the cat mutilation number beyond a dozen in Thurston County since February of 2018. Another hot spot going on at the same time is in the region of Houston, Texas, and I've also been told that St. Petersburg, Florida, might be having cases there that have not been reported much beyond the local area. If anyone in Florida has more information about bloodless cat mutilations or beheadings that are bloodless in the Florida region, please get in touch with me. My email address is earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Just always remember, I'm a reporter who files news about the earth. Earth Files. So my email is earthfiles@earthfiles.com. As sad and distressing as all of this is, I sincerely feel it is important to report the phenomena and to keep asking for any more information that any and all of you might have about bloodless cat mutilations or other animal mutilations, large and small, in your town or region. I've been reporting about them since 1979. They have not stopped. They are ongoing around the world. As I have reported last week and the week before that and going back several months, there have been the bloodless beheadings or spine removals or other excisions like half cats in the London region of England since 2015, and now the number there is exceeding 500, according to the RSCPA, the Royal Prevention Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. And the very fact that that number has reached that level and not a single person has been arrested or arraigned. This is typical of the last, going back to the 60s. You will hear that the mutilations must be being done by a deranged individual. Well, from the 60s to 2018, around the world in both hemispheres, ongoing right now as we speak, from Argentina to the United States to England and beyond. The very fact that law enforcement privately says there cannot be one individual or even two individuals responsible for a phenomena that has been going on year after year, decade after decade, and not a single shred of evidence that ties it to a human. The problem is, how do we prove who the perpetrators are? There have been eyewitnesses in the large animals, like ranchers who have seen a glowing circle of light put a beam down into a pasture. And those ranchers have seen a cow or a bull rise up in a beam or be lowered in a beam, but they would not stand up in front of my TV camera and talk on the record because they were so afraid of being called crazy by their fellow human beings. I hope we're getting past that stage. I hope we are now finally, as we move toward the middle of the 21st century, beginning to understand we can't be alone in this universe, and there's too much evidence, both historically and current, that there are alien presences on this planet and probably throughout the solar system and the Milky Way galaxy that are involved with manipulating all kinds of Earth life. And then there is this huge question. Why would there be the bloodless mutilation of animals that humans love and keep in their homes? The cats. And I raised that issue recently in one of my other YouTube channels, asking that question. Could it be some form of retaliation? Is there some kind of secret war that is going on between our military and something else? And that what happens to the cats could be some form of retaliation. So I'm going to keep trying to report so that people coming to the Earth Files YouTube channel are not left out of something that is happening on this planet, continues to happen, and I think that everyone should be aware. It might help you with your own animals wherever you are, being more concerned about where they are and taking them in at night. Now, I would like to move on to a thought-provoking email that I received today from a man who asked me to call him simply Michael. He is 52 years old. He works now on Wall Street in New York doing IT computer work for financial companies. But this morning, he sent me a thought-provoking email about very vivid dreams that he started having around age 18 to 20, which would have been 1984 to 1986. And here's what he wrote to me this morning. Quote, I have been dreaming about our galaxy since I was a child. My dreams are very vivid. I will tell you the following. The Sphinx and the pyramids on our planet are part of a giant network. They are essentially nodes. The Sphinx has been changed many times over history to represent the different groups that have governed the Earth. The pyramids that surround similar structures are nodes of a network that produce both energy and a network grid in this solar system, on our Earth, and beyond our solar system throughout the entire Milky Way galaxy. The Sphinx is essentially a gateway, as are the additional pyramid nodes with specific hieroglyphs that are scattered across planets everywhere. Mars has many of these, as do other planets. If you think of the internet, these will make sense. From my dreams, alien ships travel here via this network. You will find representative structures on all of the planets in our galaxy and beyond. In one of my dreams, I was brought to Saturn, which is a giant power station for our galaxy, the ring of which is representative of a defense security system that shifts and changes to accommodate the requirements for security. In one dream, I was brought well out of our galaxy, and I remember accessing this grid network. We simply dropped into a stream and ended up in another place in the universe, close quote. Well, I talked to Michael this afternoon on the phone about more details, and I learned that his very first memory was traveling above a greenish-colored planet and seeing superimposed all around the planet lines that were a neon glowing green, and they were crossing at 90-degree angles, sort of like a net, but curving around the planet that he could see. And then he saw bright lines emanating from a bright spot that he suddenly knew that is the Sphinx in Giza. And instantly, with that recognition, he was going right down between the two legs, paws that stretch out from the Sphinx, and he entered, he said, right between where the two legs come out of the chest. And then he was engulfed in a blast of white light that he understood to be a, quote, dimensional portal transporting him to another planet that was orange and reminded him of oxidized Mars. He began to understand from his vivid dreams that pyramids like Giza were portal nodes for gateways such as the Sphinx throughout the universe. They go together. The pyramid is the node, and the Sphinx works as the portal, the access, the gateway. Michael also was given information in his dreams that the intelligences behind the network of nodes and gateways propels their craft technologies by the energy emanated from the nodes in the galactic grid. When I asked him if that propulsion energy was 0-point energy that Hal Puthoff at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Austin, Texas, has been trying to crack for decades, Michael's answer was yes, he thought that it was. And then, after our phone call, he emailed me a few more comments. He said, to understand how these craft hover and reach such speeds, think of a ship as an IP packet over the internet. Coordinates of some kind are referenced, and these craft speed across the network. One point of clarification, they do not travel across specific lines, but they take advantage of this energy that blankets the Earth and is generated in node points that goes out beyond the Earth, our solar system, and throughout the Milky Way galaxy. He said that the network is multi-dimensional in nature. Its atom-level energies are tied to particle molecules, and that utilizing ions and particles, it can enwrap the packet of whatever the information or the energy into this grid. And then he said that one of the most important legacies that he has had from the dreams, it has been stressed with him that under a normal universe, cosmic, sort of peaceful universe, that all of the planets have a kind of resonant frequency, and that this resonant frequency is something that is very important to these grids, these networks of communication and transfer point to point in portals in the universe. And that he has gotten some kind of download in the dreams and traveling through these portals, that when we exploded the atomic bomb, first at White Sands on our planet and then Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan in 1945, that we didn't realize that we were tearing in to other dimensions, we were tearing into this grid, into this network. And that was not going to be allowed because we, without having consciousness of what we were doing, were hurting other existences. And he said that from my dreams, the alien ships that travel here via this network, that they have built similar structures with similar hieroglyphs using the pyramid structure basically all over the Milky Way galaxy. And that he was stressing with me that if his dreams are any kind of a legitimate download from alien intelligences that do interact with humans as those in the human abduction syndrome, Michael doesn't think that he's in that category, but that dreams are used by other intelligences to communicate with humanity, and that in this case, there may be a reason, a timing with this individual about getting across this idea of network grids that involve pyramids and sphinxes and portals and moving point to point. And that what came to me as he was talking is that it just starting about 2 years ago for the first time, and over the last 2 years, I've had additional information from 3 different whistleblowers that have had military background in special ops. And they have firsthand information either by eye and physical body being under the 2-mile ice in Antarctica, getting there by submarine, where there are huge structures under the ice that have hieroglyphs, and that there are pyramids, and that there are other ancient artifact structures, and that these military whistleblowers have said to me the symbols and the structures 2 miles under the ice in Antarctica, on the backside and interior of the moon, and on our Earth and Mars, that they all match. And this is sort of one of those, okay, I've heard about the matching hieroglyphs, matching structures that would be Earth, Mars, and the moon and Antarctica. And now here is a person who surfaces with this kind of an architecture of some kind of a grid that involves portals and zero-point energy. And then further, it was 6 years ago in June of 2012, I had just returned from Göbekli Tepe in Turkey on June 15, 2012, and I did this extensive 6-part, very deep Earth Files report about all of the photographs and video that I had taken and interviews and being there firsthand, and what a strange structure that was, and how we had been impressed by the fact that the German archaeologists had been able to find through compression physics that Göbekli Tepe had been structured over 300 and some tall, 15, 19 foot tall tons weighing pillars made in rings covering many acres in an area that is called Göbekli Tepe because that is Turkish for Potbelly Hill. And it was the shape of the hill that provoked archaeologists to do an investigation starting in the early 1990s. And when we were there in 2012, they had only been able to excavate 5% of all of what they knew from deep ground penetrating radar were at least 300 some pillars in these big rings underground. But what Klaus Schmidt, the German archaeologist, was able to discover is that the whole complex was built about 12,000 years ago, and then at about 11,000 to 11,500, the whole thing was covered up. And that what we have been introduced to in the 21st century is the second covering of all of these big, huge limestone pillars set in ring patterns. And that the question, what happened 11 to 12,000 years ago? Why was there a construction of these rings at that site 12,000 years ago? And what would have happened that something would have had the ability to cover it all up? And then Klaus Schmidt would start uncovering it in the early 1990s. And one of the best guesses comes from geophysics, that about 11,000 years ago, there was some kind of an impact on Earth on the northern hemisphere side, caused all kinds of fire and damage and destruction, and that something that built Göbekli Tepe might have known this was coming. And at that region, there are lots and lots of underground structures, underground tunnels, places where people went underground, raising this question about how much of the earth, we live on the very top rind, how much of our planet has structures like pyramids, like rings of these giant limestone T-shaped pedestals, underground, either deliberately or for a very specific strategic reason. Well, it wasn't long after I returned from Göbekli Tepe that I received an email from a man named Douglas Muchler. He identified himself as a retired intelligence officer who had worked at Fort Richardson in Anchorage, Alaska. And he sent me his DD-214 and photographs and certificates about his military work. And then he wrote me saying that he had entered active duty in the U.S. Army, and that when he was stationed at Fort Richardson, that it was the first week of December of 1992 when he and 39 other men, 40 total, were in one of the rec rooms, and they were watching TV. And a news report came on about the extraordinary discovery of a large pyramid underground in Alaska. And Doug Muchler was so impressed by this documentary that he went to his room and he wanted to program his VCR to get a tape. He wanted to have a copy of this to study. And when he got up in the morning, he called the station that was there, I think it was Channel 13 in Anchorage, and said that he wanted to get a copy of the documentary about an Earth crustal study in a documentary that when China set off a huge megaton nuclear test in Lop Nor on May 22nd of 1992, the geophysicists had been able to find this huge pyramid underground in Alaska, studying the seismic waves. Well, to his surprise and great confusion, he was able to talk with the television station manager, who told him they had never broadcast such a documentary, did not know what he was talking about. And Doug Muchler said, "You know, I've been working intel, and I know when people are lying. And I knew that the general manager of that TV station was lying to me." So he said, I just up and went down there. And I went to the manager's office and said, now I know that this was broadcast and there are 40 of us who saw it. And the general manager of the TV station persisted with the rejection that they had broadcast this and told Doug Muchler that it was time for him to go. And he said as he was leaving the TV station, a man who had been off in a corner near some equipment came over to him quietly and said, "I have only a minute to talk with you. I just want you to know that what you're talking about, we did broadcast a documentary last night about an underground pyramid in Alaska." So when Doug Muchler was contacting me, I'd just gotten back from being exposed to all of the underground issues in Turkey. I was very interested in the idea that there might be some big pyramid underground in Alaska. So I began doing some calls and started doing reports at Earth Files, interviewed him, asking for people who may have information to get in touch with me. And I ended up with half a dozen very, very interesting supports of the idea of a large pyramid in Alaska that allegedly, the consensus is, 60 miles almost straight west from what was Mount McKinley and today is Mount Denali. And that's fine to say in a general region. But the expense of flying helicopters and doing search and magnetometers, you need a specific latitude, longitude of exactly the spot where this pyramid is. And I've asked for that now since 2012, over and over and over again. I still haven't gotten a specific latitude, longitude for us to investigate. But what I did receive after interviewing Doug Muchler for the radio broadcasts, on September 3rd, 2012, I received an email from a son about his father's first-hand knowledge of an underground pyramid 2 hours east of Unalakleet by Huey helicopter, and this was a trip in April or early May 1978 that the father took. Unalakleet is on the Pacific coast. If you go 2 hours inland, depending upon which exact direction, you will get to that point that is about 60 miles west of today's Mount Denali. So depending upon whether you come from the west or from the east going west, it might be in the general region. Unfortunately, the father did not leave a specific latitude, longitude. But what he did do is he talked with his son, who gave me permission to use his real name, Bruce Pearson. And Bruce told me, quote, "My father served on a PT boat in the Philippines in World War II. After the war, he went to work for the United States and stayed with that career until his retirement. He received a typewritten letter from Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal that might have been a form letter, but it was signed in ink, in original, in Forrestal's name. My parents were teachers in Unalakleet, Alaska for a couple of years. They joined the Civil Air Patrol when they got to Alaska, and my dad would always make a point of telling about any mission that they flew in detail, as I was getting flight training in ROTC and was a member of the New Mexico wing of the flying out of the Clovis Composite Squadron based at Cannon Air Force Base. That's the son who was interested in aviation because his mom and his dad had been. Until you related the story of the gentleman that you call John Smith. This was an engineer who had worked for Western Electric, and his son had written me, and I will give you some parameters from that interview, but it's important to stay with the Unalakleet to this location story first because of what the father learned from the helicopter pilot who was taking him to this location. Quote, "On the way flying east from Unalakleet, the helicopter crew told my dad that they were not going to a dew line station." That was where we built the dew line to keep track with radar of any possible missiles or Soviets or overflights over the North Pole. The father thought that's what he was going on, was a mission related to dew line. The crew told my father that they were going to a, quote, ultra-secret underground facility that was every bit as hush-hush as the Manhattan Project. Manhattan Project is what Robert Oppenheimer built the atomic bomb for the United States under complete secrecy in Los Alamos. So this site in Alaska that the father is flying to with a crew is, quote, every bit as hush-hush as the Manhattan Project. The pilot also told my dad to be prepared for when they landed. He was to stay on the chopper until it was refueled and not to speak to anyone, or it would mean all of them landing in prison or worse, close quote. My dad asked the helicopter pilot if they were going to a nuclear facility. The pilot also told him it was not a nuclear device and that it was not made by man. It was an incredibly old pyramid and they had no idea where it came from or how it was built underground of cut stone. This is supposed to be very dark, possibly a composite not found naturally on our earth, and cut by some kind of an instrument into the pyramid. And listen to this sentence. This is directly from the Father to the Son. And that our government had somehow determined that this dark pyramid underground was capable of producing enough energy to power the whole North Slope, all of Alaska, and most, if not all, of Canada. Close quote. The son said, I remember asking my dad if he believed that. And he said, quote, if you saw the way the guards at that facility were armed with dogs and 50 caliber machine guns on the jeeps, I know something pretty bizarre was going on. And when we got within about 5 miles of the place, the pilot went to VFR, since all of the instruments went completely crazy inside of the helicopter. My dad said there were about 4 different warning bells ringing, and the radar screen went completely full green. The artificial horizon was spinning like it had lost vacuum, and the compass was spinning around. The co-pilot had warned my dad that this would happen, but that he would be able to handle it, the pilot, because he had been trained. And the father told the son that he could at one point see above them, where they were having all of these gyroscope problems, that there was an escort plane flying S patterns at several thousand feet the entire time that the helicopter went to this location where there were all the magnetic anomalies. They went down to the ground. He said, quote, the chopper's cargo was 3 suitcase-sized containers about the size of today's 1500 series Pelican cases, which are about 4 feet by 3 feet by about 1 foot high. And those are made of very high-quality aluminum-looking alloy. There were no markings other than warning labels advising top secret, not to be handled or opened unless authorized. This is the equipment that the helicopter pilot had on board and when they came down from this choppy magnetic anomaly setting down, the machine guns and jeeps were waiting, and military people ran to the helicopter, pulled out whatever these cases were, and then the helicopter took right back up. The father said to the son that whatever it was that those military men pulled out of the helicopter at this site that was west of Mount McKinley, then Mount Denali now, he said they were unbelievably heavy. He could tell that when the armed personnel at the facility where the chopper landed that there were no insignias on them anywhere. And he thought that was strange, since they were all wearing clearly military uniforms that were all black, no insignias. The only things visible of the facility was a concrete blockhouse, a small tank farm and motor pool, and the top of what, to the father who talked to the son, said it looked like the top of a mine elevator that was surrounded by light towers and electric fence topped by razor wire. And later on, he said, my dad told me that in the Bell Labs in Murray Hill, New Jersey, that there was a chief engineer working there, and that he had information, and that this man sat down to talk with this engineer, and they started talking about Alaska, and then the engineer told the son a story of a friend that he knew who had worked for Western Electric, who had been recruited by the government in the 1960s to work on a super secret power project in Alaska. So it was his father and the Western Electric engineer who said that this was referred to as a dark pyramid because it was made out of a black composite, and that the dimensions that were given is if you are standing on the surface and you go 150 feet straight down, you would come to the top vertex of the pyramid. Then you would come down to the base, 500, it was 150 feet down, 700 feet to the base, 550 feet down to a base, and the base was 700 feet underground. And you would think that if there is a huge pyramid underground west of Mount Denali that could power nearly all of Canada, that would be something that would be glorious to introduce to the world, get rid of polluting fossil fuels. And then as soon as I say that sentence, I'm sure most humans say, well, until every last dollar is squeezed out of every drop of fossil fuel, those that are invested in it don't want to introduce anything else. But I'm sharing this tonight because as an investigative reporter and journalist, who I work in long arcs over a long time in which threads of one story comes into another, and pretty soon you have 3 to 5 to 6 stories, and they may have been all disconnected, but they start coming like together, and you begin seeing a pattern. And starting with that email from a man who is having dreams, to the hard military experience of Doug Muchler up in Fort Richardson, watching with 39 other men a documentary about a Chinese nuclear blast, a megaton, being used by geophysicists to study something in Alaska and finding a big pyramid, and then having a station deny they had ever broadcast, which is so strange. And then I put it out on a broadcast, and I start getting feedback with military certificates, names of men who told their sons that they had worked on a huge, dark pyramid underground about 60 miles west of Mount McKinley then, Mount Denali now, and that at least 2 of these sources knew that this pyramid was capable of generating a tremendous amount of energy. Is the pyramid turned off, or is it on? Who built it? Does it tie back to the emailer about his dreams, that there is a grid? The whistleblowers that have been talking to me for the last 2 years say there are grids. There are grids throughout the solar system connecting in the Milky Way galaxy. On the grids, there are portals that other intelligences move point to point. We on the Earth are still struggling with blasting up with jet fuel, or perhaps moving out into lasers, but lasers to propel only little tiny craft that would go and film maybe an exoplanet. That's Project Starshot. So these are threads that are coming into focus in August of 2018 at exactly the time when we are hearing that Elon Musk wants to launch for Mars in 2 years, that Trump is calling for a space force, that we have Starshot that is going to start propelling little craft, perhaps dozens of them, so that some will survive, to head off to the nearest star, Alpha Centauri, and take at 20% the speed of light, maybe, 17, 18 years to get there. And that we are already, we've got plans, we've got money, we've got budgets. We're heading off of Earth. And I just find it so ironic that as we are seeing interstellar, 0-point energy, we need to understand how to manipulate gravity so that we could collapse space-time and move point to point and get away from blasting off things in Euclidean geometry. That the irony is that on our own planet Earth, underground, perhaps all over underground the planet, are pyramids that once upon a time were part of a grid on this planet with surface pyramids that created free energy endlessly and were used as communication devices around the globe. Who made them? Where did they go? And why are we so denied information about other intelligences and the ancient past of our planet that might have been a host to many different non-humans for millennia? Homo sapiens sapien is not the beginning. Homo sapiens sapien is one of many evolving life forms on Earth. And hopefully, as we go forward for the rest of this century, we are finally going to get that big headline, we're not alone in this universe, and we're going to have a whole new kind of reconstruction of what is the truth about our solar system, Mars, Venus, our moon, the Earth, in relationship to other intelligences that already travel point to point in the cosmos. It's both exciting and frustrating when you realize we've all been kept disconnected from facts about our ancient past for far too long. And hopefully what we're all going to be able to do is start coming together as a human family, being able to say, this is now being shown to us, this dark pyramid in Alaska, and it could be the answer to the Earth's future energy problems forever if it were exposed. So, revolutionary times, none of this is proved, but these are eyewitness testimonies about this dark pyramid in Alaska. And as I've always been trying to do at earthfiles.com and in all of my work, my books, my documentaries, television, radio, and the web, is to bring as many facts as I possibly can and then go to people who are whistleblowers, people who have knowledge, but they aren't willing to sit in front of you, and try to be a summarizer of what I am told, stressing that I don't have the hard fact that I would like to deliver, but that it's important, I think, to take the synthesis of all of this and present it to you for you to think about, and that those of you who are coming to my Earth Files YouTube channel, some of you may have your own exposure to this concept of either the dark pyramid underground in Alaska or other pyramids around the world, and that it would be extremely valuable for me to get information that I could keep adding to what appears like a puzzle on a table, and that the more pieces that I can keep adding, maybe we will all together start seeing a clearer picture. I sure hope so, and I would like very much, Lori, now to spend a few minutes taking some questions and thanking everybody for listening tonight to these many different threads.
You bet, Linda. And first, I have to tell you, this is one of the most incredible groups of people listening tonight. I would like to read off the list of your generous supporters tonight. Thank you so much to Douglas Jones, Kimberly Holden, Minnesota Folk, Traveling Lion, Starry Sky, Kristen Seibel, Stanky Juju, Odin, Super Vegeta 66, Carla Mines, Sentient Dreamer. Thank you so much.
Wow. What can I say? Thank you very, very much.
It's been a very fun group tonight and just so incredibly generous. And I just have to give another shout out to Minnesota Folk for being here every single week and for supporting the show every week, and Christine Seibel as well. Just really amazing supporters.
I love you guys. I hope we just could keep growing and growing and growing and have these fireside chats every Wednesday for a long, long time. So thank you for the help.
All right, so here's our first question from William. What does Linda theorize they are doing with the cats? DNA collection for hybridization?
That is an excellent question. Going all the way back to 79 and sitting and talking with ranchers, deputies, sheriffs, pathologists, veterinarians, a hematologist that I work with, always was the question. Whatever is taking the organic tissue and blood and fluid from these animals, what would they be doing with it over now a century and a half? And possibly it's been going on for thousands of years in a different way, perhaps. The amount of fluid, the amount of tissue, it takes it out from my point of view, and that was our early discussions, was this does not seem to be in the category of a scientific monitoring of tissue contaminants, whatever would be the big reason for monitoring Earth, manipulating Earth life, putting new species into motion. It comes to mind, but then why would you need thousands of tissue from animals? Well, every time in discussion we would hit that brick wall, there would come the other. And the other option that has actually been reinforced by some people in the human abduction syndrome is that one of the, we'll call them alien life forms that might themselves think that Earth is theirs, that Earth is their territory, but humans would look at them as alien life forms, are the reptilian types. Some come like lizards, very fine, pebbly, tiny pebbly. Think of a lizard skin. I've had people draw those for me from abduction experiences. Other people draw the full-bore alligator, crocodile, with the big scale. Think of an alligator or a crocodile. There were two men, I believe this was Colorado. It's in Earth Files. And they were beamed up. They saw the beam coming from a craft, and there was nothing they could do about it. They went up in this beam, and when they got into a room, they described lizards, and that the lizards telepathed that they were scientists. But what they had on the craft was a cow. And that's right. And the two men had seen the cow going up in the beam of light before they went up in the beam of light. So now the cow is there, and it's hooked up to a whole lot of tubes, and it's alive. And they, like many people who have had these telepathic communications about animal mutilations, they have the impression that it is vital that the blood, the fluid, the tissue, all of whatever is being taken, that it all occur while the animal is still alive. And they got the telepath concept that these lizard beings used what they were doing for sustenance, for food. Now, a lot of people, they just reject because they think, oh, it sounds like a sci-fi horror movie. Well, if you look at our own planet, what are we doing thousands and thousands of times every day in slaughterhouses in every country except India? India reveres the bovine and does not slaughter them, but everywhere else, bovine are slaughtered. So, depending upon what your perspective is, human, reptilian, Eben, blonde, red-haired, the humanoids, this mixed menagerie that none of us fully understand, what are we dealing with, and how complicated it gets with the third facet to your question: genetic harvest, sustenance. Could it be that all of this harvesting of a variety of genetic material from our planet is being used in rapid cycle cloning to create any kind of organic body that is wanted? Perhaps to camouflage on Earth or go someplace else, and that what we are incapable of comprehending at this point on the Earth is that there could be interstellar trade routes having to do with genetic material that is made into any kind of container for a huge number of planets. We can't think that large because we've been confined to Earth. And humans have our own provincial idea of what life is and what should happen in life. If we're getting ready to go into an interstellar age, I think it's pretty much guaranteed. Whatever life we find, wherever it is, from microbes to swimming creatures to things that fly, if there are atmospheres to fly in and beyond, a lot of it would be unrecognizable in terms of Earth life. So the unknowns begin to pile up when you go to, here are the facts of mutilated animals for decades. The facts are there. The evidence is there. Hard pathology is there. Collagen that is cooked, hemoglobin that is cooked, capillary blood that is missing, hearts that are missing from inside of animals with no surgery, and on and on. But what we are missing, and I think law enforcement is as baffled as the rest of us, whoever is doing this, what is their agenda? Why does it keep going on and on and on? And that's what I've been trying to get to the bottom of for a long time. And I'm not going to give up. And if I ever get a definitive answer to your very, very good question about the cats, I will report it. God bless all of the cats. And the very fact that what is excised is different with the cats. Just the spine removed from the base of the neck down to the groin and tailbone area and just lifted out. That is something to write down, and in news reports anywhere in the planet, even in war zones like Eritrea, Iran, and Iraq, are there any reports about the spines of humans and other animals, just the spine, being lifted out? I have heard that that is the case. If so, what would be so valuable about just the spine? Unconnected to the ribs, you have to cut it to lift out the spine, you have to excise the ribs off as well. And in these cases, there's no blood. It's all done surgically and precisely and no bleeding. So it is baffling. It is one of the most haunting things happening on our planet. And I will just keep trying to report what I can. And with all of your help, you as our wonderful, wonderful audience and curious and group of people, maybe somebody will say something to you, or you will learn something and you get it to me, and it will be another one of those threads that I can weave into this fabric or this puzzle that I'm trying to see the whole clear picture. So thank you for that question. How about one more?
You bet. And we have even more incredibly generous folks tonight. Mitchell Epling, Dog Noses 3, Olivia Blackstar, Vicky Fertel, and Melissa Latimer. Thank you so much for your incredible super chats.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. It really helps.
So, Linda, we have quite a few questions here. If you wanted to go for a little longer, it's up to you. So the first one is, are pyramids free energy generators?
Well, according to that engineer, the father-son that I was describing, and the helicopter pilot, that was what our government discovered, that there was an enormous amount of energy that could be generated from this 550-foot tall pyramid, 150 feet underground. And I do remember in discussions with the son that of the father, who was the Western Electric engineer, that it had something to do, they were studying the geometry, the relationship of the dimensions, specifically of the Dark Pyramid, and that it has something to do with, if you knew the frequency, somehow generating a frequency that would turn on, quote unquote, this big pyramid, you would then have the equivalent of all that energy that the helicopter pilot said could power nearly the entire nation of Canada from that one pyramid. And so we have all of the anecdotal stories that pyramids could be great energy generators. But I personally have never seen hard physics showing me that that is what would happen. Maybe there's somebody out there who does know. I would personally like to learn a lot more about the whole idea of the pyramidal structure with very specific angles. If you match everything mathematically, what is it that that structure would do that would tap into 0-point energy or something that would sustain the generation of energy that could be harvested through some technology, and that the structure itself is providing the tap into energy? That's sort of the concept, but I personally don't know of any hard data and evidence that anybody has done that with Giza or any of the other pyramids. There's lots of pyramids on the surface of this planet. They keep finding more and more pyramids in the whole Egypt region by using deep ground penetrating radar. What do we not know about what is under the surface of our planet? It is one of the big unknowns that could bring to us tremendous breakthroughs in energy if we just knew how it worked and what it would mean. So I am open to hard information, I hope, from people who have real science and physics background, that this whole issue of pyramids above ground and below ground, specific, very calculated mathematical relationships between surface pyramids and underground pyramids that would set up some kind of a frequency that would release the energy. That's the concept that I have. One more question.
Here's a really great comment that I think you would like. Lawrence says, so if you can take the heart out without harming the pericardium, couldn't you take a nuclear warhead out and leave the missile?
Yes, I'm sure. I know that my own brother was a helicopter pilot at Malmstrom Air Force Base at Great Falls, Montana. And I remember how excited he was calling me when I was doing medical programming at the ABC station in Boston. I had a typewriter. I didn't have a computer this would have been 1976, I believe, and 75 or 76. And I was typing on a typewriter on the floor. When the phone rang, I picked it up, and it was my brother, and he was, Linda, UFO has set down on the base. And it was the famous Kilo 7, when an estimated football field sized orange fluorescent glowing craft was monitored by a sabotage alert team coming all the way down over Kilo 7, which was a Minuteman missile underneath. And my brother learned that the next day and the day after, they were going through sequences of what to do, and they took that whole missile out. And one of the things that my brother learned was that at that time, the Minuteman missile had a magnetic tape of zeros and ones that would give the target information. And he learned that only the binary code for the target information had been changed on the magnetic tape, and that it was highly classified, all the information about what that target was changed to. Well, think about this as Salas, Bob Salas, and others, an engineer I talked to who was from Boeing, and Boeing made these Minuteman missiles. And the engineer told me what happened to all those Minuteman missile silos and interrupts and all of the things that happen, missiles going offline every second, 10 at a time. Boeing said was impossible. The engineering couldn't do it. And yet, in the presence of a big glowing UFO, all of these kinds of things happened at our Minuteman missiles. So that demonstrates that we're dealing with something that has the ability to go down 80 feet or 60 feet underground, depending upon the missile silo, and manipulate zeros and ones on magnetic tape in the Minuteman missiles, and did it over and over and over and over. Now, the pericardium around a cow's heart. Zeros and ones on a magnetic tape, you're interacting with magnetic field selectively. Inside, let's say, of a 1,700-pound pregnant cow, you're not manipulating the tape zeros and ones. You're going through what we would call organic tissue from the hide into the chest, and having the ability to perhaps extract molecules, specific molecules of heart tissue. And I think it was a program a couple of weeks ago or 3 weeks ago that I talked about this whole challenge of understanding in large animal mutilations, how could you take out the entire heart of a grown animal that is, the heart would be something like 7 by 11 by 9 inches big. And this has happened more than once. And in this one particular case, Sheriff Tex Graves in Logan County in Colorado watched as the veterinarian lifted up on his gloved hand this glistening material. And when the sheriff said, "What is this?" and the vet said, "Well, this is the pericardium that surrounded this heart, but the heart is gone, Sheriff, and there's no cut in this pericardium. The pericardium should surround the heart. How would you get the heart out without making a big incision in the pericardium?" And it was almost, I remember Sheriff Tex Graves and I talked about this aspect of the UFO ET phenomena. It's as if there is a flaunting. You can't do this. You can't even figure out how this is done, meaning humans. Well, medicine for a long time has had a dream wish that we would get to a point where there didn't have to be any cutting on the skin, cutting through cartilage, cutting through nerves, cutting down to get into interior organs. It's called a molecular scalpel, or you would be surgically operating by frequency match. That heart tissue would have a very specific frequency, and that you could go in, extract the molecules, literally, of just that frequency, and that would take out the heart. Or in a constructive gallbladder surgery, you wouldn't have to have any cuts. You would just take out the molecules of the portion of the gallbladder or all, and it would be done by frequency and molecules. To my knowledge, we don't have any molecular surgical device on the earth at this point. But hearts disappearing from the chests of mutilated animals with no surgery cuts on the chest or the body, therefore no explanation for how the heart could be taken, let alone leaving the pericardium intact in the chest. That has happened several times since at least the 1960s. So the technology that has interfaced with earth animal life, the way the animals are left to be found on purpose, is almost as if some kind of other intelligence wants humans to pay attention to what is happening to these animals, large and small. They may be studying our investigations, and that the only conclusion that you can draw when you've been to as many of these bodies as I have, 30, 40, 50 personally, and there's no blood, and when there's no tracks around the body that is dust, then you know that the animal had to have been lowered to that position, because there's no tracks. There's no tracks anywhere around the body. And I dedicated my first book, An Alien Harvest, to law enforcement who looked to the sky and began to understand that what we were dealing with wasn't on the surface of the earth, but was something that had the ability to pluck animals and even people with a technology that to the human eye looks like beams up and then put them back down. Humans are handled differently. Abductees are returned alive, some inspired, some think that they have been with angels, and others are traumatized. What makes the difference? And who or what is behind the decades-long, centuries-long, bloodless mutilation of animals large and small on this planet? Join me on Wednesday nights for Earth Files YouTube channel for continuing to try to come up with more data to answer that question and so many other questions that are going to come pouring in as we are beginning to launch a base on the moon, a base on Mars, and sending out Starshot craft to Alpha Centauri, 4 light years away. What an exciting time, a confusing time, and a time of so many unsolved mysteries. Thanks. I'll see you next week.